Welcome to TYT Interviews. We got a doozy for you tonight. We're going to be speaking to David Duke, former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, former one-term Louisiana State House Representative, a candidate for governor, senator, president, author of My Awakening, A Path to Racial Understanding, and Jewish Supremacism, My Awakening to the Jewish Question, founder of the National Association for the Advancement of White People, convicted felon for tax evasion and mail fraud, and current international spokesman opposing, quote, Zionist imperialism, Zionist aggression, Zionist terror, and Zionist murder. That's his quote. David Duke, welcome to the Young Turks.
I'm going to start off by just everything's going fine, but I always get those introductions. You know, I left the Klan almost 40 years ago, and the interesting thing is that I have with me a picture of Nelson Mandela at the ripe old age of, I think he's 72 in that picture. In front of the hammer and sickle, the clenched fist. He was a member of the Communist Party. In fact, he was a Central Committee member of the Communist Party. He was a communist leader. But I don't think I've ever seen him even talked about as a former communist. Now, communism in the world killed how many people? Maybe 80 million, 100 million people worldwide. It's just unbelievable the double standards we have.
So, David, though, wait, though. If you're going to compare yourself to Nelson Mandela, you shouldn't leave out the fact that he also saved a whole country.
Let me tell you,
he freed millions upon millions of people. I mean, I haven't seen you do that yet. So,
let me tell you, I'm fighting for my people the same way he fought for his people.
That's interesting.
And that's what's funny about this. If you're a European American and you want to preserve your heritage, your rights, your interests, your values, you're called a racist. If you're an African American, you do it. If you're a Jewish American, they have thousands of organizations advancing the interests of Israel and what they call the Jewish agenda in this country. So the double standard is really amazing. Now, by the way, as far as
David, though,
I also have to respond to the two ways you introduced me. As far as being a tax fraud individual, here I have a copy of the letter. Let me see if you can see it on the thing. This is a letter from the IRS after they put me in. Of course, the American government never goes after people for taxes for political reasons, of course. But this is after the judge ordered a complete audit on my taxes when they sent me off to the Gulag. And this was 9 months later is a letter I got from the IRS while I was still in prison, while I wasn't even there to defend myself. It was an audit. It was a fair audit, by the way, with a black woman leading it and two other people. The IRS was a task force. And the determination of the letter was that for the year in question, I overpaid my taxes by, well, $6,000. And that's according to the letter. And there's the refund check I got back from the IRS.
Now, David, you could put that stuff up, but I mean, you spent 15 months in prison.
I sure did, because
and you admitted to guilt.
I think the real reason why I went to prison was because I dared to challenge the Jewish supremacist, the Jewish racist rule over American foreign policy, of the American government.
But that's not what you admitted to, David. That's not what you admitted to. You admitted to exactly what I read off here, which is tax evasion and mail fraud. That didn't have anything to do with the Jews. It had something to do with what you did. You admitted to it.
You are a lawyer. You were a lawyer, right? Or you are a lawyer, probably still.
Mm-hmm.
And Cenk, and you know very well that in America, whenever you have any sort of financial issue, they can lay as many charges as they want. So I've got a choice of going
I don't know that.
court of law in New Orleans with 50% of the judges that are Jewish, with a very large black population. As a former Klansman,
then why didn't you? But David, I thought your whole life was fighting back. Why didn't you fight? I mean, this was your one opportunity. You get to go and get justice.
I am very happy to fight if I get a fair fight. I had a choice, as my lawyer very carefully explained to me, and I know as your attorney, you gave your clients this kind of advice before too, who were innocent of charges. I had a choice between doing 15 months, or if I lost in front of a black jury, which I think would have found me guilty of, they would have given the death penalty for jaywalking ticket for that matter. I think I could either take 15 months, or I could take the risk of still being in prison to this day the rest of my life. So obviously,
okay. So let me ask you a unique question about that.
I did what I had to do, and I did my work.
Okay. So let me ask you a unique question about that. Having spent time in prison and now just testifying to the injustices of the American system, Do you sympathize a little bit more with Black Lives Matters movement when they complain about the injustice of this so-called justice system?
I think there are a lot of injustices in the justice system, no question about it. And I saw a lot of people in prison who shouldn't have been there, and I saw a lot of people in prison who maybe should have been there a lot longer. I don't think it's a very equitable system, but I don't believe there is a systematic discrimination against African Americans by the system. I've read a very good analysis of it by a professor from a university in Florida, entitled "The Myth of the Racist Criminal Justice System in this country." I think it is really a myth. It's just like the idea that policemen are shooting down black people disproportionately. And I tell you, policemen sometimes shoot down innocent people, and there are some bad cops, no question about it. But more white people are shot down by police officers in this country than black, far more. And
yeah, but that's
the truth is that.
But David, wait a minute. I know those facts. So first of all, there's more white people in the country than black people. Per capita, unarmed black men get shot 4 times more than unarmed white men. And more black men get shot per capita by cops than white men. You know that.
Well, I know also that disproportionately whites commit far fewer crimes. If you actually take the white criminal element, whites are shot down about 3 to 4 times more than blacks. I'll give you an example from a Mother Jones article.
I like that subset of the white criminal element as opposed to all blacks.
No, I'm not saying that all blacks are criminals, but I'm saying percentage-wise, blacks are generally they're actually about 6 times more likely to be a felon and commit a violent crime in this country than whites are per capita.
David, I don't want to get into a huge debate here. You're going to throw around numbers that can't be verified. But I will tell you, I'll just say this one last thing. I hope on this, which is that I think an interview I did with a former Baltimore police officer, Michael A. Wood Jr., is instructive in this case. He said, "Look, you think black people have been lying?" He's white. He said, "You think black people have been lying about what cops have been doing to them for the last 100 years? No, they're not lying." He said, "Even when we were assigned to white districts, we were worried that it might be a judge's son or someone else powerful, so we wouldn't make arrests there. We wouldn't look for crime. We wouldn't do any of that. We'd just go into the black areas and make our quota by arresting people, whether they did something wrong or not. We didn't need to get prosecutions. We just needed to arrest black people." So I'm curious that when you hear something like that, do you dismiss it out of hand? Do you think that Michael Wood is lying? Like, what reaction do you get out of that really interesting fact about policing in Baltimore, for example?
I'm not saying that there's no policemen in this country that are racist, but I'll give you an example. And in the actual report produced in New York by the liberal administration in New York, by the way, and about crime, and they have a crime on shooting in New York, and they literally show that whites are only 3% of the gun offenses, that is, guns used in crime, and there are no whites that had fired a gun at a police officer in New York City. Over 60% of the people who fired guns at police officers in New York City were in fact African Americans, and yet only 22% of the shot and killed people in New York City were African Americans in that year, 2011, which was the year that in fact Mother Jones used. So I used that year, 2011.
But David,
let me finish.
All right, go ahead. Yeah, that's right. Go ahead.
And so, but 44%, were in fact European Americans. Even though 3% of the people that use guns in crimes were European Americans, there were 44% of those shot. I think that a police officer. Most police officers, maybe there's some exceptions, most police officers realize if they shoot a white criminal, no big deal. It's not going to get national news. You shoot a black criminal, you might end up getting the electric chair yourself. So there's a big difference, and I think there is a racism in this country.
All right, David, again, those things are enormously skewed or not true. So, for example,
I have data. I've got exact quotes on my website.
Hold on. Now let me finish.
People can check it out for themselves, and you can look at the 2011
David,
the gun report by the department in New York with the largest.
I let you make your statements about those stats. So first of all, it's not true that white people getting shot by cops is not news. It's tremendous news. I did a story about a white guy getting shot in Miami. He was a bank robber. Yeah, he had a blade on him, but he was nowhere near the cops. He was putting his hands up, and they shot him anyway. It's not that the cops are. It's not that individual cops are racist, which, again, even you've acknowledged. Of course, that happens from time to time. It's that the system, first of all, disproportionately targets African Americans. So you talk about New York. Well, in New York, over 90% of the stop and frisk were for minorities. So if you keep picking on minorities, well, you're going to get into more confrontations with minorities. So they shouldn't surprise you like, well, I went and hassled minorities nonstop, and then all of a sudden it turns out that I got into conflict with minorities. That's because you started it. Okay, now in the case of, hold on, let me finish. David, let me finish. We got to let each other finish. David, we got to let each other finish.
Go on and on.
Hold on. No.
David,
you got to let me conduct this interview, otherwise it's not going to work. Okay? And now, turning back to...
Let me just take one point at a time.
No. Let you finish, let me finish. Okay. So, when you come back to the issue of whites getting shot as well, of course they do, because the problem is the training. So there is the disproportionate effect on African Americans and minorities, but they also shoot white folks. And that's because they're told not to take any chances at all. So if there's any percentage chance that they could be slightly nicked, they're going to shoot them down and they're going to execute them. The problem is in the training. And you talk about criminals in New York. The biggest criminals in New York were the Wall Street bankers that extracted billions of dollars from the economy, and they were let off scot-free, and they were almost all white.
Yeah, like the Zionist bankers of Goldman Sachs, who stole $500 billion. And they were totally let off the hook. They didn't do a day in prison. That's exactly right. And they also...
You mean like Moynihan from Bank of America?
Democrats is the biggest contributor.
The CEO of Bank of America was Moynihan. Does that sound Jewish to you?
Well, you can give me some Gentiles who are CEOs, but let me tell you, the biggest, most powerful banking consortium on earth is the Federal Reserve Bank. And the Federal Reserve Bank, for the last... I've got a little graphic here. The Federal Reserve Bank, for the last 3 decades, had only Jewish Zionists, all right, chairman and vice chairman, Greenspan and Cohn, Bernanke and Yellen, and now Yellen and Fisher. Fisher's also a citizen of Israel. They totally control it. And you mentioned on one of your programs recently, I think, or a while back, you talked about the fact we had a $700 billion TARP, but we actually had, guess how many? $2.1 trillion, more than that, it was $7 trillion.
$7 trillion, yeah.
$7 trillion to the banks. Now, anybody who thinks that this Ben Shalom Bernanke is a very strong Jewish supporter of Israel, is a strong supporter of Jewish
self-organization. What is that?
Anybody who thinks he's not going to favor his own fellow Jewish bankers giving out that money, like Goldman Sachs, these other bankers.
No, but David, you misunderstand the problem entirely. That's why you've spent a life headed in the wrong direction.
Oh, yeah.
Now, look. So the Federal Reserve has tremendous issues. By the way, there was 2 co-sponsors of the bill to audit the Fed. One was Ron Paul on the Republican side. The other one was the guy who actually started the whole process, Alan Grayson, who's a Democrat, who also happens to be Jewish. So why does this Jewish conspiracy want to undermine itself?
Well, let me tell you something. I'm not a person that's saying that every Jew is involved with the conspiracy. Some Jews I really admire, like Gilad Atzmon, a few other Zionist Jews. But there's no question about the fact that the Zionist establishment, the Jewish establishment in this country, is very much in favor of groups like Goldman Sachs and giving their money. And according to Forward newspaper, which is a major Jewish paper in this country, these Jewish activist organizations, the Agenda, these Zionist organizations, get over $300 billion operating to fight for what they see as Jewish interests. And so that's what's really going on. It's not a canard.
Not what's going on. All right, look, you think...
The biggest predator bank on earth is Goldman Sachs.
No, but you know who was the head of Goldman Sachs, who then led the entire bailout of what you say is Jewish bankers?
Yeah, I know who was head of it, Blankfein and
No. Blankfein was the head of it afterwards. Hank Paulson. Hank Paulson is Christian. Why did Hank Paulson, who's Christian, decide to give all the money to the Jewish bankers, according to you? Once in a while. Vikram Pandit, CEO of Citigroup.
Goldman Sachs is overwhelmingly the biggest stockholder of Goldman Sachs was Aviv Nevo, which is short for Tel Aviv Nevo, Aviv Nevo, and he was also the biggest stockholder of CNN, which also went over to Mr. Zucker as far as that's Time Warner, which is CNN's a subsidiary.
CNN was started by Ted Turner. How is he Jewish?
Ted Turner's not Jewish, but that's not who controls CNN now.
Well, I'm pretty sure he controlled it for a long, long time until he sold it to Time Warner and made good money.
I'm not saying there are not Gentiles involved in the media. But the 10 largest Hollywood studios, and that's movies and television studios, and this television goes all over the world, and the movies affect many people's perceptions and ideals all over the world. The 10 largest studios in Hollywood are run entirely by Jewish activists.
Okay, look, David, again,
every one of the 10 largest. Now,
okay, hold on.
Why? How can 2% run 100% of the 10 largest Hollywood movie studios? No wonder we have these crimes in the Middle East going on there, because we don't have any movies talking about the Zionist crimes against the Palestinians, the Lebanese, the Zionist crimes against the. We can go on. The Syrian. Right. We have a Syrian war right now because the Zionists control American policy, which made us support the jihadists, which have not only destroyed Syria, but they're also leading jihad and danger and terrorism in America and Europe.
Okay, so you mentioned cable news. You mentioned CNN. You happen to have named one Jewish executive that happens to be in charge now, although there was non-Jewish executives throughout. There was a non-Jewish owner throughout. When I was at MSNBC, and still today, hold on, let me finish. When I was at MSNBC, the CEO was Phil Griffin. I believe he's Irish. I'm not sure, though. Chris Matthews was their largest host. I think he's Irish. Lawrence O'Donnell does a program there. I believe he's Irish. Dylan Ratigan was there. I believe he's Irish. So can I say, the Irish, they have rigged the media in America?
First off, you're the one cherry picking. You can't take a couple of examples.
No, you can't take the Irish examples. Only the Jewish.
The truth is, in terms of media, in terms of the major conglomerates, we've actually got 5 major global conglomerates. The 5 largest. Okay, we can just go through them. We got Disney, which is Uygur. All right, we got Time Warner, which is the biggest stockholder.
Why did you bother investigating the religion of all these people?
I can just go through it if you want to. I can give you the names. I know.
Okay, so again, David, if I were to concede your point that there are success,
I got a Jewish publication called the Chronicle, which literally admits the fact that Jews control 4 of the 5 largest planet.
But hold on.
Which is.
David,
maybe you're not letting me finish now, but
that's true.
The 5th one is run by Murdoch, and they say he's a Zionist as much as the other Zionists.
Murdoch's not Jewish.
I know, that's what I'm saying. So 4 out of 5 are Jewish, and they say that Murdoch does whatever the Jews want. They want
they say, who's they? Murdoch, I'm pretty sure, is his own man.
Opposition, by the way.
Murdoch is not the kind of guy to get bullied.
I don't think Murdoch's a real conservative, and I can prove that.
If Murdoch's not a conservative, then I don't know who is.
Well, he said, I'll give you a statement. I got a statement from him. I can show it to you from the media.
Okay.
He said he wanted Mr. Bloomberg to get the Republican nomination for President of the United States. And Mr. Bloomberg, by the way, spent $50 million to take away the gun rights of the American people and
Jewish.
Yes, he is Jewish.
Okay, so David, let me ask you something.
I don't think Murdoch. I think Trump was right about the fact that basically Fox News laid in wait and they attacked him, attacked the Republicans. I think Fox News is controlled opposition.
Okay.
And every time they get a Middle East question, they bring on this Jewish expert, Krauttheimer or whatever, to start telling the people how to think about the Mideast.
Okay. So I know it's Fox News is a false flag.
And the same thing goes on the left wing too. Okay. The same thing goes on in CNN. Okay. The same thing goes on MSNBC. The same thing goes on the rest of them.
So David, whenever I mention non-Jews, you say they're the exception. But then I give you a long list of Irish guys, the exception. Everything's the Vikram Pundit, major head of Citigroup at the time of the bailouts, exception. Moynihan, head of Bank of America, exception. Everything's an exception. Okay, hold on. Let me finish the point.
There's an article. Let me answer your question.
No, I didn't ask the question. Let me finish the question. Okay, hold on, David.
Let me answer your question. There's an article in the Jewish Times of Los Angeles about the control of the media, and they literally said 4 out of 5 of the largest media conglomerates on the earth, which basically control about 80%, all right, of the mass media in the world. 4 out of 5 of the largest conglomerates on the planet are run by Jews, and one of them, Murdoch, is not a Jew, but he's as much Zionist as the Jewish heads of the other networks.
Okay, so
that's what the Jewish Times of Los Angeles. I think we can trust those Jews. You're not anti-Semitic, are you?
Okay, so First of all, if Murdoch you claim is a Zionist, okay, so you have a policy difference with him. It doesn't make him any more or less Jewish. Okay, and he's not Jewish. Okay, so
you're denying
for Christ's sake, let me finish the question. Let me finish the question. Okay, I got it. CEOs quote Bill O'Reilly: CEOs go in, CEOs go out. You can't explain that. Some of them are Christian, some of them are Jewish. You happen to pick one particular article at one particular moment in time. But let me finish the question. Otherwise, I got to end this, David. Let me finish the question.
To show you, this is from the New York Times.
Okay, I know it's a particular moment in time. Okay,
well, listen, I'm going to.
So David, let me.
Leading newspaper.
I got to end this, David.
America, and one of the leading columnists in the New York Times. His name is David Brooks. If you don't mind, let me quote what he says about what's going on in this country. The name of the article is "The Chosen Getting In," and this is a quote from it. A woman came up to me after one of my book talks and said, "You realize what you're talking about is the Jews taking over America." He says, "My eyes bugged out. But then I realized that she was Jewish, and she knew that I was too, and between us, we could acknowledge there's a lot of truth in that statement." Quote, "For the Jews were the vanguard of a social movement that, over the course of the 20th century, transform the American system into the whole nature of the American elite." They are the elite now in this country.
Okay, but so that's going to go to the question I've been trying to ask for the last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So even if I were to concede your point, which I most certainly do not, that the Jews are somehow running things, or that they are in charge all the time of these media companies. But if I were to hold on, if I were, for Christ's sake, let me ask the question. If I were to concede that point, okay, so they did a great job. They rose up. They were successful. They should be applauded. Whereas you didn't, so you're a loser. So what's the difference? They're the winners. You're the loser.
I'm not a loser.
Why don't you go run the studio? Why didn't you run the studio?
I served 8 years in public office. I went and got.
Why didn't you run CNN? What's stopping you?
I've written 3 books, which are in 25 languages. I don't think I'm a loser. I don't think.
But I mean, you keep telling me the Jews are the winners. They did a great job. Okay, all right, fantastic, yay.
Example: the reason why they dominate the media, and another example. This here is Elena Kagan. Now, she was appointed to the head of Harvard Law School by Lawrence Summer, who was at that time the Jewish head of Harvard Law School. And while she was head of the most important law school in the United States of America, she made a number of appointments to professorships in Harvard Law. So, interestingly enough, 50% of her appointments at Harvard Law School went to Jews, from 2% of the population. Now, I also have another good example.
You can cherry pick these facts all day long.
Let me give you another quotation.
Kagan is on the Supreme Court, but so is Sotomayor, and she's definitely not Jewish. She's Latina. I mean, Kagan made it onto the Supreme Court, but so is Sotomayor. Those are 2 picks by Obama. Sotomayor, clearly not Jewish. In fact, what is it? I think 7 out of the 9 justices are Catholic. Oh my God, the Catholics have taken over the Supreme Court! Watch out, David! Watch out! It's the Catholics that are the problem.
I can answer your question. 33% of the Supreme Court are Jews. They're only 2% of the population. And the reason why Kagan got appointed to the Supreme Court...
But 6 out of 9, sorry, my bad. 6 out of 9 are Catholics.
She never really practiced at all.
Are 2/3 of the country Catholic?
Overwhelming Jewish political power.
Are 2/3 of the country Catholic?
Are
2/3 of the country Catholic? Are 2/3 of the country Catholic? Are 2/3 of the country Catholic?
Well, approximately.
No, they're not Catholic.
I'm talking about among Christians.
No, they're not. 2/3 of the country is not Catholic. 2/3 of the Supreme Court is Catholic. David, you got the wrong boogeyman. Remember, the KKK was also against Catholics. I know you're more inclusive.
I'm not against Catholics.
Okay, no, you're more inclusive.
That was
one of your innovations.
You know what? I'm for opportunity in this country, and I'm against real racism, and the ultimate racist apparatus that's going on in this country is Jewish racism, and that's why I'll give an example this way. You always hear about white privilege. Another chart I give you. Okay, now this is about Harvard. This was written by Ron Utz, who's a Jewish writer, former writer for the Wall Street Journal, but a courageous Jew, which I honor. And he did a great story.
It doesn't seem like you're honoring Jews, yeah.
Well, listen, I do honor him, but he did a great article called "The Myth of American Meritocracy," where he went to the Ivy League. And in this article, he shows that there's no really white privilege in this country, because the truth is, you don't have white privilege when European Americans, who are 98% of the white population, when European Americans are now only 20% of Harvard and the Ivy League, which is where the elite comes from in America. Jews who are 2%,
You know why?
Jews who are 2% of the population are 25%.
Because their SAT scores are not as good.
No,
Their
not true.
GPA is not as good.
No,
You know what they're losing the spots to? They're losing spots to Asians. Hey, David, you got to add Asians to your list because they're kicking your ass left and right in education.
Yeah, you know why they're kicking our ass? Because they're discriminating against non-Jews. They're not only discriminating against European Americans.
Well, how about the Asians? Are the Asians secretly running things?
Proportionally represent.
When you take away affirmative action like you did in California, Asians wind up becoming enormously dominant in the schools. Is there also an Asian conspiracy, or are white people just not that bright?
No, because in California they got rid of the so-called affirmative action, and under the color of so-called affirmative action, they were able to throw out the test results and put in less qualified Jews in the Ivy League. That's why they're there. Look,
you keep going back to the Jews, but that's not the issue in California. That's not the issue when you take away affirmative action. And by the way, I don't want anybody to get me wrong. I don't think white people are stupid, obviously, because I don't discriminate among races.
I think it's the greatest single source of universities of the American elite. If you graduate from Harvard, you got your ticket punched. You can just about go anywhere and become a leader anywhere. So let's talk about that for a second. Let's just go into the detail of what the American elite and how it's composed. Okay, just for a moment. All right. Now, certainly Jews are 2% of the population. Even if they were 50% better in their SATs, which are not. All right, that would be 2%. They would go to 3%. But Jews are 25% of Harvard University.
Okay, let me ask this,
please. And all of the Ivy League. And according to Ronutz, and according to studies I've done with Dr. Patrick Slattery, who's another former professor in the Ivy League, who's done a complete study of the whole process, Jews are put into Harvard 13 times in higher numbers than their merit justifies, and they're 2.5 times higher than Asians. Their test scores justify. Wait a second. They're about 20 times higher than Mexican Americans or Hispanic Americans. They're about 20 times higher than African Americans. Even African Americans are discriminated against. They are the ones who are being favored because they run most of the university's provosts. They run most of the entrance. Like good examples of Harvard, Miss Singer, who's Jewish, runs the entrance of the school. And they have a system now where they control Harvard. Look, Jews complained when they were limited to 15% of Harvard. Well, Jews were at the maximum where Jews were 33% of the population. So they were given 500% overrepresentation at Harvard than their percentage of population. That's not exactly true diversity, is it? But that's a fact. Now we've got 70% of the American population, which is European American, but we're only 20% of Harvard. These are universities of our people. European Americans built every brick, built every department, was all created by European Christians. That's who built Harvard. And now we're only allowed to be 20% of the students at Harvard. That's discrimination. That is racial discrimination on a massive scale. And Jews, who are 2%, are given 25% of the positions.
Oh, why are you guys such schmucks then? If you built everything, but somehow you don't have power anymore, you can't even get into the schools you built, why are you guys such losers?
Our people never saw it coming. Our people have always been, European value system has always been give people a fair shake.
You've been too fair to Jews.
The Jewish minority got Palestine, and the same way, the Jews as a group are the most organized group for their interests, for their agenda, for their policy on earth. Israel is a terrorist nation. Israel killed.
Let's get to the core of your ideology.
They maimed, burned, injured, or killed 25,000 Palestinians in Gaza just summer before last. 25,000 people.
Okay,
there are almost no Israeli casualties, but 25,000 Palestinians. Israel has even committed terrorism against America. Do you know what the Levant affair was?
Yeah, I do. So
what was the Levant affair?
Okay, so I don't want to get into. Look, David, we're never going to get out of this interview if we go. We're going case by case, statistic that is cherry picked after another. I want to get to the core of your ideology. In fact, I didn't want to discuss any of this. I want to discuss something else entirely. But now that we're on this question, I've got to ask you, what is the core of your ideology? Why?
Terrorist attack on America, where they attacked American installations, in Egypt, tried to blame the Egyptians to get us in a war against Egypt. One of the Jewish agents had the bomb go off in his pocket. The whole gang was rounded up. Later, by the way, the entire Jewish gang that attacked America with terrorism was given medals in Israel. I've got the clippings from the Israeli papers, right?
Okay, David, I know you can go all night.
We didn't bomb Israel. We sent them more money. That's all we did.
Okay, so what do you think? So you've got this whole thing mapped up in your.
Just call a spade a spade? Israel is a terrorist country that attacked America. They attacked us in the Liberty. They committed treachery against us in the job and politics.
David.
So much power in politics and in media and banking. They got so much power. Nobody can even say that Israel is a country that's committed terrorism against America.
I don't know why I'm trying to get into your mind, but I'm trying to figure out in your mind how this is all working. So your core ideology, do you think that the Jews are actually getting together in some room and saying, okay, Bob, you take banking, Steve, you go and get media, and then, is this that kind of a literal conspiracy, and then in your mind, and then how do they execute that? How do they get white Christians, blacks, Latinos, everybody to go, yes, sir, absolutely, sir, step aside?
So let me ask you, can I answer your question?
Yeah.
And I'll try to tone it down a little bit because I hope we have a better discussion as we go along. I know, and I'll talk as long as you want, and if you give me time to talk, I'll be happy to. You can take all the time you want. It's your show. That's fine. But here's the deal. Why is this happening? Well, it's happening because there is no people on the planet who are more organized than they are. They're very powerful in money. They're very powerful in media. They're very powerful in politics. The biggest political contributors in both the Democratic and Republican Party are these Zionists. A good example is Goldman Sachs, which was the biggest contributor for Obama, then the biggest contributor for Romney. When they would see whatever interest that they had, they didn't like some of the things Obama did, but overall he was very, very favorable. I think to Israel. I think you probably believe that too. We see what we call the Council of Presidents of Major Jewish Organizations. Now, these are the 50 largest Jewish organizations in the United States of America, right? They openly state that their agenda is to support Israel. They openly have a number of positions on all major issues in America. Now, they support, for instance, open borders for America, open immigration, open gates for America, but they support Israel, which has one of the toughest immigration policies in the entire planet. You know, Netanyahu won't take one refugee from Syria, and Israel and the Zionists had a big role in creating the Syrian civil war because they hated Assad as they hated Saddam, as they hated the Lebanese as enemies of Israel. I have a book by Moshe Surratt, who was former head of Israel, called Israel's Sacred Terrorism, his diaries, where he talked about making the Muslims and the Christians fight in Lebanon. So they are organized. Now, I'm not saying that.
What does that mean? They're organized.
That's
what I'm trying to ask you.
They're taught.
Do you think they get together in a room and make these decisions?
Well,
because
no,
I mean, if they support Israel, so what? That's a policy that they like. Guess what? Turkish Americans generally support Turkey. Wow, newsflash.
Look. The most powerful lobby in our United States Congress is AIPAC, by far. It's the one lobby.
Do they get together in a room?
That no congressman or senator can go against. There's a lot of people still go against the IRA, the American Radical Association. There are lots of people that go on all sorts of policies, but on a foreign country, we got a foreign country that's got the most powerful lobby in the United States of America. The biggest three contributors last year in politics, according to, I think it was the Daily Beast, one of the major publications, was Goldman Sachs. Sheldon Adelson was the biggest one, and Sheldon Adelson is the biggest contributor in American politics. This guy, you probably know this, he literally called for dropping atom bombs on Iran. And this is the biggest contributor in American politics. I mean, this is obscene. So 2 out of the 3 are the largest. And then you look at the numbers. The Washington Post did an article. I've got that too. I'm not going to show you all these articles. Again, you can go to my website. People can get them. The Washington Post said, quote, that 60% of the contributors of the Democratic Party for president were Jews, and about 50% of the Republican contributors of the big money.
Okay, I can't let you keep saying these unverified numbers.
I can show you the New York Times.
Okay.
Hey. That's not me.
I mean, you keep saying Goldman Sachs, but before Blankfein, the head of Goldman Sachs was Hank Paulson. Christian extraordinaire. And you say that Adelson, hold on, and you... No, you're filibustering, David. You're filibustering. No. Okay, you say the biggest contributor is Sheldon Adelson. The biggest political contributor in the country is not Sheldon Adelson. It is David and Charles Koch. They are enormously Christian. They're Christian.
The biggest single contributor, the 15-16 cycle, is Sheldon Adelson, and they actually gifted figures by a major publication.
So even if you were right that they were a shade, and he was a shade higher than the Koch brothers, which again I do not concede. Okay, but then you've got the Koch brothers who buy all these politicians. They're not Jewish. How does that fit into your conspiracy theory?
By the politicians.
Koch brothers don't buy politicians?
Who buys the politicians?
Koch brothers.
Look, the Koch brothers do too, but you know something? The Koch brothers, if the Koch brothers tomorrow came out and said, well, I don't think we should support Israel anymore because Israel's committed terrorism against us, and because Israel has hurt America in the Middle East and done terrible crimes against these people. If they did that, I can tell you what would happen to the Koch brothers. They would be demonized by the media. They would be their business would be absolutely harmed, and they would suffer. They know that.
$80 billion.
We don't know who has the power in this country. If you start criticizing,
you know who has power? People with money have power. The Koch brothers have money. Yes, Sheldon Adelson also has money. Yes, I don't agree with a lot of his policies, almost all of them. He's a deep right-wing Republican, so I don't agree with him. I don't agree with the Koch brothers. So the problem is the people with the money buying the politicians. It isn't. Why do you pick out only the Jews? Why do you only pick out the Jews? Well, isn't it the problem that people with the money are buying our politicians? So why do you care if some of them are Jewish and some of them aren't? Like, why are you focusing on the wrong problem? That's because you're obsessed. You're obsessed. One of the questions I was going to ask you is whether you're still racist. I don't know why you get touchy when we say you were the Grand Wizard. You're obviously still enormously racist and bigoted. So why don't you just say it?
The biggest contributor in the Democratic Party is Chaim Sabin, who is a radical Zionist. Okay, that's a fact. Soros obviously is
I believe radical Zionist is not a fact. I believe that's your interpretation.
No, it's the New York Times.
He supports Israel. I know he does. He supports the right-wing positions in Israel. I know he does. But calling him a radical Zionist is, trust me, open to debate.
Supremacism, which literally documents all this from mainstream media, mainstream publications like the New York Times, Washington Post.
David, why do you care that people call you racist when obviously you are? When you're anti-Semitic in terms of you don't deny you're anti-Semitic, right? I mean, after all this, for Christ's sake, you don't deny you're
anti-Semitic. I'm not anti-Semitic.
You're not anti-Semitic?
Jewish extremism.
Who in the world is anti-Semitic if you're not? Name me an anti-Semitic person. Name me an anti-Semitic person.
Look,
name me one anti-Semitic person.
Israel is a Jewish supremacist state.
Okay, name me one anti-Semitic person.
Let me ask you a question. Do you
No, I'm asking the question.
Jewish supremacist state.
I'm interviewing you. You.
But
name me one anti-Semitic person.
I say that
you can't.
Organized.
David, how can you think you're not anti-Semitic? How could you possibly think that you think the Jews control the world? That's anti-Semitism 101.
I'm opposed to every Jewish
person. Just admit it. Say it.
I'm opposed to the Jewish.
Say it.
I'm opposed to the Jewish establishment. Every major Jewish organization, hundreds of millions of dollars of wealth and power, they all support the Jewish state of Israel. Israel is a state based on stealing the land from the Palestinians, which they did. 600,000 people ethnically cleansed. Israel even has a law that a Jew or a non-Jew cannot even marry a Jewish person in Israel.
We're not in Israel. We're in the United States.
That's a fact.
We're in the United States.
America or Canada or Great Britain or let's say France passed a law that said a Christian or a white person or anybody else can't marry a Jew. That would be on the front pages of every paper saying this is the most evil state. They probably want sanctions against that country if the government passed that. But Israel has exactly that law. But there is nothing going on. Most people don't even know this law exists in this country because the Zio media that dominates this media doesn't allow it to be talked about. Politically, you can't talk about it.
Okay, so now, David,
it's not really funny. You make me kind of laugh because you're always changing the subject instead of just
I know
going deep into it.
I mean, you talk about changing the subject. You went on the Israeli domestic and foreign policy. Okay, look, you want to criticize Israeli policy. That's an entirely different matter than saying that Jews control the U.S. and the world.
The reason why we have this policy in the Middle East, the reason why we went to war in Iraq,
it just seems like you're bitter. It seems like the Jews you found some Jews who did better than you, and you're bitter.
No.
So just fess up. They did better than you. Some Jews did better than you, and you seem super bitter about that. Man up. Man up! Go get Harvard! Go get him! Go get Harvard!
Look at this. If Jews were their power, I wouldn't mind Jews controlling Hollywood, the 10 largest studios, and making these thousands of movies if they promoted the values, the true values of humanity. The television programs Hollywood puts out constantly promotes absolute, I'm telling you this, torture. They act like torture is justified if the person is evil. You see this repeatedly. You see it in Blacklist. You see it in so many programs in the Hollywood media. They promote drugs for our young people, which has cost millions of lives, not only of Americans, and black Americans and white Americans, other people all over this country. They promoted the so-called gangster rap genre, which promotes drugs, violence, disrespect of women.
Oh, I knew we had to get to the blacks at some point.
Music industry that promotes gangster rap and which glorifies it in our mass media is completely Jewish control. And that's a fact. There's no argument about that. So I don't mind Jews being successful. I mind them trying to destroy the values of this country and hurting people. I don't believe the values that Hollywood teaches overwhelmingly is good. We have thousands of movies. You've got a daughter, don't you? From what I understand.
Oh, please, let's leave my kids out of it.
No, I'm not. I'm just talking about from a human being. There's lots of people out there listening who have a daughter. How many movies do you see, and most of them are aimed at young people, promote what's called drinking games, where they have the stars get up there and they drink themselves to oblivion? Now, when your daughter, and I am asking the audience too, when your daughter gets 13 or 14 or 15 years old, and she's around a bunch of high testosterone kids, right? Would any of you really want your daughter to drink themselves to oblivion and be in a position where she could be raped or abused or hurt or harmed? Of course not. This is a kind of garbage and evil that the Hollywood media presents and promotes constantly to our young people. Drugs, disillusion, degeneracy, destructiveness of all types.
Did you just
and you know that, I know that. I think that 90% of your liberal audience and your conservative audience knows that Hollywood doesn't preach good values to our young people.
Okay, did you just say the Jews invented beer pong?
What?
Did you just blame beer pong on the Jews?
I said the Jewish Hollywood constantly promotes
over-drinking? Over-drinking is the Jews' problem? I'm pretty sure Christians are pretty good at that.
Drugs are constantly promoted in movies.
I'm pretty sure Christians are pretty good at drugs too. Are you saying that Christians don't do drugs?
Using drugs. They had a movie with what's her name, Amy Schumer, the other day, and she makes this. It's like a big joke. She's talking to her sister, and she finds a cocaine bottle there that she's using. Oh yeah, of course. So she's a star. You have. All right. Well, then don't do Gaga, right? Lady Gaga videos and other Hollywood productions.
Okay.
Where Lady Gaga.
I'm going to ask you one more question.
She's got a big cross on her, like a nun's habit, and she's gang raped by about 6 or 7 guys, and that's promoted. You have Nicki Minaj using every kind of nasty word, promoting every sort of violence and drugs and destructiveness, which really hurt black people as much as they hurt white people. But Nicki Minaj isn't the source of this. The source of this are those Jewish individuals that control the gangster rap music genre. And
I've actually interviewed one of the largest rap moguls in U.S. history. His name is Russell Simmons, and I assure you, he's not Jewish. He's black.
All right, are you telling me that most of the leaders of the look? If
Here we go again. Okay.
All right. I have all the names. I have black rappers that talk about it. I have black people that talk about it and give you all the names and the facts. The people that, for instance, the biggest producer of all is a guy named LaGrange, who's a Jewish.
All right, here we go.
Supporter of Israel, and he had
some people like Israel.
The top Billboard chart at one time, the top 10 Billboard charts in this genre. One Jewish guy named LaGrange. They dominate the music industry, and I don't think it
You know what? I'm beginning to believe, David. I'm beginning to believe you're not anti-Semitic. You can't compliment Jews enough. They're fantastic. They're enormously successful. But then why are you crying about it? Why don't you celebrate it?
These evil things that they're promoting for our kids, I just don't think that's a compliment.
The movies have great endings. All right, anyway, I'm not going to get into movies with you. Okay, so David, here's my last question. So, and what I'd actually asked you to come on to talk about, I know you had some stuff about David Vitter, but he already lost. He's a loser, so we don't have to get into that. But what I actually want to ask you is, some of your ideas have actually caught on with the Republican Party. And I wanted to see if you want to take credit for it. Because, for example, the idea to to drug test welfare recipients is now wildly popular among the Republicans, and that was your idea.
Yeah.
So, do you want to, and I'm sorry, earlier I said, maybe you were complaining about being a loser, but maybe not. Maybe you won in some instances.
Well, the New York Times had an article saying that my program is GOP mainstream, and I would say a lot of it, yes, but a lot of it not, because I've always believed that we should put America first and not Israel, and I've worked very hard against these wars. I mean, I don't think that any of the wars that America fought, except for the American Revolutionary War, which was a defensive war for us to basically be free and independent, were good wars. And
we shouldn't have fought the Civil War.
So I really. Yeah, I worked hard before the Iraq War. I said there were no weapons of mass destruction. It's all there on my website for years. Anybody can check it out. I was proven to be right. This was all launched by Pearl and Wolfowitz, which the American media themselves admit that they did this. They wrote a paper for Netanyahu called Securing the Realm, a clean break, Securing the Realm, which was the realm of Israel by going to war against Iraq, going to war against Syria, going to war against Iran, and going to war against Lebanon. And this is
Projects for a New American Century, also signed by Dick Cheney, not Jewish.
I believe that if we can drug test people for no question about it, we can drug test people who work for a living and pay taxes. I think it's absolutely fair to drug test people who want to receive the public dole. The least we can ask them is that they don't take the money and use drugs. And by encouraging them not to use drugs, they can actually have better lives. I also think that welfare recipients should be reproductively careful. They should be responsible, because when they have a child born out of wedlock, which is about 85% of them or 90% of welfare recipients, what's going on there is that woman has a much more difficult time becoming successful, getting education, going forward in her life. And there's millions and millions of hardworking middle-class people. And during my campaigns for governor and senator, I encountered this quite a lot. When they said to me, I asked them, "Well, you have any kids?" And they said, "No, we don't have any kids." And I said, "Well, why not?" She says, "Well, they said we just can't afford it." And one of the reasons they can't afford it is because of the taxes we pay. So I think there's got to be some responsibility from welfare recipients for their benefit and our benefit. Yes. I also believe there's other parts of my platform. I've been talking about the dangers of immigration for a long time, and I'm very happy to see that Donald Trump has really brought this issue to the forefront. I don't agree with all his policies in terms of Israel, and there's some other things maybe that I would disagree with him on, but I think he's absolutely right in that we are losing our heritage in this country, and I believe this is a racist policy. I believe that, the European American people were 90% of the population when I was 21 years old. That's a blink of an eye in the history of a country, and we have a policy that's purposeful to changing America to a multicultural, or actually putting European Americans into a minority status. I believe we have a media that is racist and hateful against European Americans. It's a constant refrain that European Americans are just a bunch of racists and accusing us of every kind of crime known to man. And I think a lot of Republicans are beginning to realize this, and in fact, I think a lot of progressives are beginning to realize this too.
Okay, so when it comes to total ban on Muslims, building a giant wall, keeping out the criminals and rapists, Mexicans, do you agree with Donald Trump?
Well, let me say something to you real careful. I know for sure that certainly it's only a small percentage of Muslims around the world that are radical. I've lectured at over 12 universities in the Middle East and elsewhere around the world, and I've got many friends and colleagues in academia. I've got my PhD, and who I call great friends, and I endorse, and they're very moderate. In fact, when I was in Syria, I visited both the Grand Mufti, who is the leading Muslim cleric of the country, and I visited with the Great Patriarch, which was a Christian cleric. There are 3 million Christians in Syria, and both of these men were decent men. And the Grand Mufti there was for secular government. He said that even between Shiite and Sunni, he's a Sunni, but between them, if you have one faction that's in power, then it doesn't allow the other factions. So I don't have any hatred at all against Muslims, but I also know that if you have massive Muslim immigration to Europe, that the culture of Europe changes, that the culture of America changes, and that America will change. And I like the America of my forefathers. If there was massive Christian white immigration into the Middle East, in any country, there would be hell to pay about it. It wouldn't be even allowed, especially to the point where they got to become majorities in major cities like they are today. becoming that in London. More kids are being born in London who are, non-British than are British. The same thing is going to happen in Paris soon. It's certainly happening in this country in terms of our own population rate. And this is a disaster because
let me
politics
be specific.
are not going to represent that of the values of the vast majority of the American people. And I think that every people on earth have the right to preserve their own unique expression of humanity. I believe in the idea of true independence for every people. I'm totally opposed to the globalism that we have in the world. And I believe every nation and every people has a right to exist. So I'm opposed to American policy in the Middle East. I'm opposed to American bases all over the world. And I think if we don't want terrorism, we should stop fighting these orchestrated wars. I believe that we shouldn't have been in Afghanistan, that we shouldn't have been in Iraq, and we would have never had 9/11 if we would not have been involved in all this. And this was because of our Zionist policy. I think that Israel was the greatest source of the hatred that goes on against the United States, and even the immigration. There's two reasons why we have mass immigration in America, and I can prove this. There's two reasons. This because the Jewish media establishment and Jewish organizations opened our gates to lobbying for it, and also because they created the Syrian war.
Okay, now,
and the Syrian war is what
broken record,
and also the Libyan attacks, which are producing dislocation of lots of people.
Okay, let's answer the actual question. So I asked about a total ban on Muslims, and then I'll be specific.
I don't believe a total ban. I think temporarily, I don't have a problem with that when we have massive amounts of
So you do agree with Trump's policy then?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that's temporary.
Ted Cruz says ban Muslims from Muslim majority countries. He introduced legislation to that effect. Do you agree with that?
Well, look, here's the situation. I believe in protecting America and the American people and the European people. And I know that we couldn't have look at the terrorism we've had from overseas in terms of ISIS. This wouldn't have happened except for the Zionist control, which had us supporting ISIS. I guess you've seen the facts. There's lots of facts showing that America has supported jihadists from the time we supported bin Laden. We supported al-Nusra, which is al-Qaeda basically in Syria. They created this.
So wait, the Zionists even created ISIS?
They created ISIS by supporting...
Why? Why would they do that?
Because
they're fundamentalist Muslims. They would hate Israel.
It's very simple. Because Israel saw Syria as a great enemy of Israel. And Israel saw Syria, they see Lebanon as enemy, they hate Hezbollah, and they hate Iran. And
I think you might worship Israel.
And Hezbollah are together. And by the way, I've visited with the Christians, for instance, of Lebanon, and you can look at an article in the Christian Science Monitor, for instance, a big long article about this. The overwhelming majority of Christians in Lebanon, believe it or not, support Hezbollah. Hezbollah has tried to lessen the enmity between Christians and Muslims.
David, I think you might really actually worship Israel and Jewish folks.
What?
I think you might worship Israel and Jewish folks because you put them up to be demigods. They control the whole world. They control everything. They created ISIS. They control the United States.
They have been
Jesus, if they're that smart and powerful, maybe we should worship them.
The Second World War. I think the Second World War could have been avoided and should have been avoided. They have promoted all these wars.
We shouldn't have gotten into the Second World War.
They promoted
of course,
basic ethnic cleansing of 600,000 Palestinians. Look,
how about the ethnic cleansing of 13 million Jews that the Nazis did?
Have you seen Madeleine Albright, our Jewish Secretary of State, when she talked about the embargo against
John Kerry's not Jewish, he was Secretary of State. Hillary Clinton's not Jewish, she was Secretary of State. In fact, I believe
actually is Jewish.
an overwhelming majority of the Secretary of States in the history of this country were not Jewish.
John Kerry. Kerry is not his real name. Kerry's real name is Cohen. He was actually changed his name, and his family changed his name to Kerry in Massachusetts. You can put your head down all you want. It's a shame.
So John Kerry's Jewish?
Because Kerry sounds like an Irish name. It sounds like Kerry's Irish Gold.
John Kerry's Jewish.
He joined Irish Italian clubs and Irish clubs, marching clubs, and that. He tried to present himself basically like an Irishman. He wasn't an Irishman. He didn't have a drop of Irish blood. He had Jewish ancestry, and he was our Secretary of State. Okay. And he's still working for Zionism when he makes any sort of deal anywhere in the world.
And so is Joe Biden and Barack Obama. Right.
No, Joe Biden, though, said it pretty well when he said that the Jewish control of media has been really good for us because it's really changed all of our values. And now we're destroying marriage and we're promoting all sorts of other kinds of unhealthy behaviors.
Okay. All right, we're going to go around and around. Okay, David Duke, thank you for joining us. It was an interesting conversation. The part that I was most stunned by is after all the screeds against the Jews controlling everything, you say you're not anti-Semitic. On the other hand, you also say you don't worship them because it sounds like you
Anti-Semitism is defined as hating other people. You know, when Trump said that he talked to this Jewish room and he talked about them as negotiators, as good negotiators, what Trump is. That was then you identified that as anti-Semitic.
I did, yeah.
I don't think it's anti-Semitic to talk about reality. The reality is that Israel is a racist state. It is founded on ethnic cleansing of 600,000 Palestinians who can't even go home. It is a terrorist state. It's committed terrorism against America. It has been behind our American policy in the Middle East with these wars. It is controlling our political process today. They're the biggest contributors of both Democratic and Republican.
Then why don't you pray to them? They're apparently so powerful.
Our media.
They're smart. Why don't you pray to them?
And they're leading us and this country
bow your head
west to disaster. And look, if people don't,
I don't think.
Go to my website, look at my documents, read my books. Here's a book, The Secret Behind Communism, which is my last book. Yeah. Now this book, all right, is I have
let me guess. The Secret Behind Communism. Can I guess, please? I think I've learned this. The Jews.
Well, the fact is that communism was overwhelmingly a Jewish movement.
How did I know it? Yes, got it.
There's no doubt about it. They brag about it.
Yeah.
And
was
the
Stalin
greatest
Jewish?
mass murder in the history of the
world
Stalin
Jewish?
Was done by the communists.
Was Stalin
by the
Jewish?
Communists.
Was Stalin
and that's the reality. And
was
yet
Stalin
we get
Jewish?
no movies about the Soviet
Was Stalin Jewish?
We have a guy like Sanders,
socialist,
which is like a mild version of Marxism or communism. Then nobody says, okay, you're echoing a philosophy that ultimately caused the death of 100 million people worldwide. If people go to my site and read my books, I think they'll find them fantastic. My YouTube videos now have over 1 billion views of all the videos about me and my lectures, and they're 90% positive rating, and that's because they make sense. And when people have a chance to hear me unmitigated, when they hear me uncensored, and when I have a chance to lay out the arguments, they agree with my arguments.
All right, I think we've given you plenty of opportunity here. Whether we should have, of course, is an open question, but. Again, thank you for joining us.
I know you're going to get some problems. I think you're courageous to have me on, and I've got a copy, of course, the tape. It'll go out anyway. But I've been on Meet the Press 3 times, and if I could be on Meet the Press 3 times, I think that Cenk can have David Duke on and have an interview.
Okay, well, we did. We did. For better or for worse.
Recently, even though, like I said, they still talk about me practically every day in relation to Trump, in relation to the guy from Louisiana, it's amazing that I don't do many national interviews anymore. I think the reason is because my arguments are very compelling to an awful lot of people. If they sit down and think about what they say, I think they'll be really surprised. And by the way, I want to make this clear too. I am not what you call a racist.
No,
I am not. Because I believe that every people have the right to seek the things that they love, the things that they appreciate, their values, their people, their interests. And I believe that every nation has the right to be free and independent. That's not what the Zionists think. The Zionists who control American foreign policy want to subjugate the entire world. They're trying to almost create a war with Russia today, which would be insane. But that's what they're doing. And we have to break ourselves through this. And I think the second
we got to go.
All right.
Okay, David, again, third time. Thank you. We appreciate it. And take care.
Anytime, if you want to ever have me back on and talk about a specific issue like Donald Trump, we could talk a half an hour about
I'm positive you could.
What's going on there.
I'm positive you could.
So, and I think that's got to be discussed.
Shot it so cold.